One of the coolest things about this property is that it's such a large property for the Willamette Valley. It's 540 acres. The next cool thing is that how many habitats it supports. It has pretty much everything that's representative of the Willamette Valley, including oak woodlands, oak savanna, eventually wet prairie. It has ponds, and this diversity of habitat supports species included in the Oregon Conservation Strategy. I'm Amy Lupo Ferzan. I'm a habitat conservationist with Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District, and I help landowners in Yamhill County accomplish their conservation goals, whether that be upland habitat restoration, including oak work, which I'm currently working on, whether it's stream restoration. We provide a variety of conservation services to help landowners achieve their goals. So going back a little bit on the history of this property and the Bertholdsdorf family that owned it previously to the Conservation District acquiring it. And it was actually a doctor up in Portland, Siegfried Bertholdsdorf, that purchased it. And he wanted this to be a retreat for his family, his 3 children that he had at the time, to give them that sense of nature, that connection to the land. And when he got to the end of his life, he wanted to make sure that this property was secured for others to enjoy just like they did.
My name is Victor Bertholdsdorf, my wife Teresa, and we live here in Muddy Valley next to McMinnville. And my father bought the property back in 1962, and I've been coming out here pretty much all my life. And he was very adamant about keeping things natural. He was against pesticides, herbicides, and so forth. And that was one of the things that made this property very attractive as a habitat, as a preserve.
And so he contacted the district way back in 2004 and said, hey, I want this to be permanent wildlife habitat. And we said, fantastic, we want that too. But how do you go about doing that? It's a really intimidating process for a landowner that knows that they want it to stay in habitat forever. And so it just kind of got tabled for a while. And then the Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program came along, and it was perfect for this property. And then we had a vehicle to move that process from the start to the end goal of permanent conservation.
Which we were very excited to do so, and it was a long process. It was 2 years from the time we started to the time we finally went to closing, but very worthwhile, and we were grateful that this program even existed.
It was the best way we could think of to preserve the property and cash everybody out, so everybody's, amiable. Last thing I wanted to see was this place go into a vineyard process.
Or a housing development.
Vineyard was definitely on the books.
And so it really all fell into place right at the right time and helps both us and the landowner and even Yamhill County preserve this property forever.
Consequently, the property really supports a huge diversity of wildlife. Everything from bears and elk all the way down to native bees, and we're hoping for Fender's blue butterfly.
I was just amazed at the variety of wildlife that show up on the game trails, and all using the same trail. So you'll have coyotes, bears, bobcats, porcupine, deer, elk. Just about you name it shows up on those wildlife cameras. After that, I started documenting photographically the wildlife within about, I'd say probably a 200-yard circle, and have got quite a few photographs
of everything. But it's a never-ending learning process, because every single species is important to the others around it. And we really have seen the connectedness of wildlife here, both between the plants and the animals and among the animals themselves.
And so it's a lot to take in and work on and figure out how we're going to approach restoration. But the way that we prioritized is we looked at those species that were rare, possibly endangered. We have one of the largest western pond turtle populations in the Willamette Valley, and so that's a huge priority, is to keep the turtles happy, keep them reproducing, and have more turtles.
Probably the most important thing with a study on the turtles, as far as I'm concerned, is finding out why there are so many. What are they eating? I know they eat a lot of dragonfly nymphs. The damselflies will coat, there'll be thousands of them over the surface. Well, they're all laying eggs there.
My name is Susan Barnes. I'm a regional wildlife conservation biologist with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And today we're at the Muddy Valley Habitat Reserve property in Yamhill County. We're setting traps in the wetland ponds on the property in an effort to try to capture one of our 2 native turtle species here in Oregon, the northwestern pond turtle, which is a priority species in the Oregon Conservation Strategy. So the northwestern pond turtle is up for federal consideration for listing on the Endangered Species Act list. And here in Oregon, we have classified the pond turtle as sensitive critical on our state sensitive species list. Part of our effort to find out more where we have remnant populations of pond turtles and to provide data to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of their species assessment process. We're hoping to get pond turtles in the traps, and we'll collect data on those turtles that we are able to trap, and that data that we collect will be provided to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of their species review process.
We're also embarking upon a wet prairie project. Currently there's about 60 acres in hay ground here, and we're going to convert that to wet prairie, some upland prairie. We hope to have some shallow ponds, and a variety of native plant species that the turtles can then go from the ponds down into this area as part of their life cycle, and also support lots of different species, including grassland bird species, the western meadowlark, the vesper sparrow. We hope to move the beaver, which haven't been so nice to our ponds with burrowing in the dams, down into the wet prairie and down into Muddy Creek, which is a perennial creek that we have flowing through the property. So again, there's so much opportunity for wildlife with it having those diverse habitats. Every native wildlife species and plant species has a chance to thrive on this property.